The morning I found a coffee mug in my sink, still warm, still faintly steaming. I had been alone in that house for 11 days. I stood in the kitchen doorway in my robe, staring at it the way you stare at something your brain refuses to process. The mug was mine. White ceramic, a small chip on the handle from when my wife dropped it 3 winters before she died. I recognized it. I knew it. But I had not used it. I had not been home since the Tuesday before last, when I'd driven up to my brother's cabin in Vermont for what was supposed to be a quiet week of nothing. I walked to the sink. I touched the mug. The ceramic was warm. Not hot, not like something freshly rinsed, but warm the way a surface stays warm when a room has been occupied. Someone had been in my house. Someone had made themselves coffee. And someone had left before I pulled into the driveway. My name is Walter Aldrich. I'm 63 years old. I retired 4 years ago after 31 years as a federal judge in the Eastern District of Virginia. I live alone in a 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb of Richmond. The same house my wife Claire and I bought in 1991. The same house where we raised our daughter Meredith. The same house where I sat beside Claire's bed the night she died from ovarian cancer 8 years ago and held her hand until it went cold. I tell you these things not for sympathy. I tell you because they matter. The man I was, the man who found that coffee mug, was not a man who panicked. I had spent 3 decades on the federal bench. I had presided over murder trials. I had sentenced men who looked me in the eye and felt nothing. I was not easily frightened, but standing in that kitchen, alone at 7:15 in the morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt watched. I set my travel bag down in the foyer and walked through the house slowly, the way I used to walk crime scenes during my years as a prosecutor before the bench, methodically, room by room, looking for what was out of place. The living room was undisturbed. The study was exactly as I'd left it. Legal pads stacked on the desk, 3 paperback novels on the side table, my reading glasses in their case. The downstairs bathroom, nothing. The guest room, nothing. I went upstairs. My bedroom door was slightly ajar. I had closed it when I left. I always close it. A habit from the years Claire was sick and we didn't want drafts disturbing her sleep. I pushed it open. The bed was made. That was correct. But on the nightstand, my nightstand, Claire's side, there was a water glass, half full, clear water. No ice, no condensation ring, just a plain drinking glass sitting there like it belonged. I do not put water glasses on Claire's side of the bed. I haven't touched that nightstand in 8 years. I stood in the doorway for a long time. My hands were very still. My breathing was careful. I was thinking the way I always thought on the bench, not with emotion, not yet, but with precision, cataloging. Building a timeline. Someone had access to my house. Someone had been comfortable enough here to make coffee and sleep with a water glass on a nightstand. The question wasn't how. The question, the one that made my stomach turn, slowly and quietly, the way a cold thing settles, was who. I called a locksmith that afternoon. Had every lock in the house changed. Then I drove to a security supply store on Broad Street and bought 4 interior cameras, small ones, the kind that record to a cloud account and look like USB chargers, and placed them in the kitchen, the living room, the upstairs hallway, and my bedroom doorway. I did not call the police, not yet. I was a former federal judge. I understood evidence. I understood that if something was happening, I needed to understand what it was before I handed it to anyone else. What I did not understand in those first days was how small that decision would make me feel later. My daughter Meredith called me that Sunday evening, as she did every Sunday. She was 41, lived in Charlottesville with her husband Daniel and their 2 kids, Lily, who was 9, and Cooper, who was 7. She was a nurse practitioner, smart and composed, with Claire's eyes and my stubbornness in equal measure. She asked how Vermont had been. I told her it was good, quiet. She asked if I was eating enough, which made me smile. I told her about the drive back, the traffic on 95, the gas station coffee that had tasted like motor oil. I did not tell her about the mug. I'm not sure why I didn't. Partly instinct. Partly, and this is the part that shames me now, because I didn't want to worry her. She'd spent the better part of a year after Claire died watching me with this careful, worried expression, like she was afraid I might dissolve. I didn't want to give her a reason to look at me like that again. So I kept it to myself. I said goodnight. I sat in the study with a glass of bourbon, and I looked at the security app on my phone, watching the empty gray-green night vision feed of my kitchen, and I waited. 3 nights later, the kitchen camera moved, not dramatically, not the way cameras move in horror movies. It was a slight shift, maybe 15 degrees to the right, so that instead of covering the sink and the back door, it now pointed mostly at the refrigerator. I rewound the footage on the app. The motion log showed an event at 2:17 a.m. I watched the clip. A shape, a person, moved through the kitchen in the dark. They didn't turn on any lights. They moved with the ease of someone who knew exactly where everything was. They went to the sink, filled a glass, and then, before leaving, reached up and adjusted the camera. They knew the camera was there. I sat with that for a long time. They had been in my house after I changed the locks. Which meant they had either a new key, impossible, the locksmith had given me the only copies, or they had another way in. I went down to the basement. The basement window on the east side, the one behind the old utility shelves, had a broken latch. I'd known about it for years. I'd meant to fix it for years. The window opened into the window well, hidden behind the overgrown boxwood hedge along the foundation. I pushed the window. It swung open silently. Someone had oiled the hinges. I want to stop here and tell you something about how grief works, because it matters to what I'm about to tell you. When you lose someone, really lose them, after years of watching them disappear slowly in a hospital bed, you don't just lose the person. You lose the shape of your own life. You lose the context in which you understood yourself. I had been a husband for 34 years. I had been Claire's husband. And when she died, I didn't know, quite literally, who Walter Aldrich was without her. Meredith had helped. The grandchildren helped. My brother Paul helped. But there was another person who had helped, too. Someone I haven't mentioned yet. Someone whose name I need to say carefully, because just writing it makes the cold thing in my stomach settle again. My sister-in-law. Renata Aldrich, née Cortez, had been married to my brother Paul for 18 years. She was 54. Warm, seemingly. Attentive in the particular way that people are when they're very good at attentiveness. After Claire died, she had organized the meals that appeared on my porch. She had called me twice a week for the first year. She had come with Paul to holidays, had made sure I wasn't alone on the difficult anniversaries, had once sat with me on the back porch for 3 hours without saying much of anything, which I had at the time found deeply comforting. I had given her a key to the house in the second year of my widowhood, just for emergencies, in case I fell, in case something happened and someone needed to get in. I had told her where the spare key was kept. I had trusted her completely. The second week after I found the mug, I drove to Charlottesville on a Thursday to see Meredith and the kids. Normal visit. Dinner, homework, the children's bedtime routine, a glass of wine with Meredith and Daniel on the back porch after. Daniel was quiet that night. More quiet than usual. He was an architect. Methodical, precise. A man who measured things before he spoke. I'd always liked him. He had a glass of red wine and kept his eyes on the middle distance. Around 9 o'clock, after Meredith went inside to check on Lily, who'd had a bad dream, Daniel leaned forward in his chair and said quietly, "Walter, can I ask you something?" I looked at him. "Have you had your finances reviewed lately, like independently reviewed?" I set my glass down. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Meredith doesn't know I'm asking you this, and I might be completely wrong." He rubbed the back of his neck. "But I had lunch with Brian Hughes last month. You remember Brian, he's at Truist, and he mentioned something. I don't want to alarm you. I just think you should maybe have someone look at your accounts." "What did Brian say?" "Daniel?" He looked at me steadily. "He said that there'd been some unusual inquiry activity on accounts associated with your name. Not transactions, inquiries. Like someone was building a picture of what you have." The night air was warm. Somewhere in the yard, a sprinkler clicked on and began to run. "Who was inquiring?" I asked. He didn't know. He said it looked like it might have come through an estate planning firm. Some outfit in Northern Virginia he didn't recognize. I was very still. "I probably shouldn't have said anything," Daniel said. "It's probably nothing." "No," I said. "I'm glad you did." I drove home that night with the windows down and my mind very quiet. The particular quiet of a man who has just seen the first corner of a very large picture and understands, instinctively, that he does not yet want to see the rest of it. But I am a former federal judge. Instinct is not a luxury I can afford. Evidence is the only currency that matters. I called my financial advisor, Howard Gregg, the next morning. I told him I wanted a complete audit of everything. Accounts, assets, the trust documents I'd set up after Claire died, the life insurance disbursements, all of it. He told me it would take a week. I told him to take 3 days. Then I sat down with a yellow legal pad and wrote a name at the top, Renata. And I began to think about what I actually knew about her. Renata had come into our lives through Paul. She was a bookkeeper for a commercial real estate firm in Bethesda when they met, and they'd married after 2 years of dating. She was originally from Phoenix. She had a brother somewhere in New Mexico she rarely spoke about. She didn't have children from previous relationships, or so she'd said. She was efficient, organized, and possessed of the particular emotional intelligence of someone who understood, very precisely, what other people needed to hear. That last quality I was now reconsidering. I called a private investigator named Marcus Dean, whom I'd worked with on several cases during my prosecutorial years. He was retired from the FBI 60-something and ran a small firm out of Alexandria. He owed me nothing and I expected nothing. I simply trusted him. I gave him Renata's name, her maiden name, her approximate birth year, the city of Phoenix. "What am I looking for?" he asked. "Everything," I said. While Marcus worked, I watched my cameras. Nothing on Monday night. Nothing on Tuesday. Wednesday at 1:48 a.m., the kitchen camera triggered again. This time, I watched it live on my phone, sitting upright in my dark bedroom, my heart very calm and slow the way it gets when I'm in the middle of something serious. The figure came in through the basement window. I knew because the motion sensor on the basement stairs triggered first. Then the kitchen she, and I knew by the shape that it was a she, moved to the kitchen counter and placed something on it. A small bag. She took something out of the bag and opened the cabinet above the coffee maker. My vitamins were there. 3 orange prescription bottles and 2 supplements I took in the morning. I watched, on a 4-inch phone screen, as she opened one of the supplement bottles, tapped something into her palm from a different container she'd brought, and added it to the bottle. She replaced the lid. She put the cabinet exactly as it had been. Then she took her bag and left. I did not move for a very long time. Then I got up, went to the kitchen, and put every bottle in that cabinet into a plastic bag, which I sealed and labeled with a piece of masking tape. I did not sleep again that night. The next morning I drove to a lab in Henrico County that I knew from my years on the bench, a private toxicology firm that worked with law firms on civil cases. I brought the bag of supplements and vitamins. I told them I needed a full content analysis. I told them it was urgent. Then I drove to a pharmacy and bought new supplements, unopened factory-sealed bottles, and I put those in the cabinet. I called Marcus Dean. "Tell me you have something," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "Walter," he said, "how well do you know this woman?" "Apparently not well enough. Her name isn't Renata Cortez, not originally." I heard him turning pages. "Birth name was Maria Elena Vargas. Born 1969 in Tucson, not Phoenix. She has a prior marriage, a man named Gerald Whitmore, Scottsdale, Arizona. He died in 2003. Ruled natural causes, heart failure." I was standing at the kitchen window, looking at the backyard. The morning light was flat and gray. "How old was he when he died?" I asked. 61, Marcus said. He was a retired accountant, widower. Had a daughter from his first marriage who contested the estate, claimed Renata had isolated him from family in the last year of his life. The daughter lost. Renata received the bulk of his estate, roughly $900,000. And then she moved to the East Coast, I said. Within 6 months of the estate settlement, she had her name legally changed to Renata Cortez in 2004 in Maryland. Met your brother Paul in 2005. I leaned against the counter. The kitchen was very bright and very quiet. "Paul," I said, not to Marcus, just to the air. My brother Paul, 66 years old, retired civil engineer. A man I had called my closest friend for my entire adult life. A man I loved without complication or reservation. How was he in all this? Was he part of it? Or was he the next Gerald Whitmore? I want to tell you what it feels like to discover that the person you've been mourning beside, the person who sat with you in your grief, who handed you tissues and poured your coffee and told you that Claire had been so lucky to be loved by a man like you, was performing. It feels like the ground opens. Not dramatically. Not with noise. It opens slowly, quietly, the way ice thins in February. You're walking across what you believed was solid, and then your foot goes through, and the cold takes your breath, and you realize that you have no idea how long you've been walking on water. I sat in my study that afternoon with the legal pad in front of me, and I wrote down everything I knew, and everything I suspected, and everything I needed to find out. What I knew. Renata had a false identity. She had a dead ex-husband whose death was unexplained. She had access to my house. She had been in my house multiple times. She had put something in my supplements, what I suspected. She was mapping my finances through an estate planning firm. She was preparing something. She had been preparing it, possibly, for years. What I needed to find out, was Paul aware? Was Paul safe? Was this about my estate, my assets, which were considerable, the result of decades of careful saving and a life insurance policy on Claire that I had invested conservatively? Or was it about something else? And the deepest, quietest question, the one I wrote last: how long has she been planning this? I called Paul that Saturday. Normal call. We talked about the Red Sox, about his knee, about whether he was going to sell the Vermont cabin or keep it another season. He sounded like Paul. Easy. I listened for anything wrong. How's Renata? I asked. Good, good, he said. She's been down in Richmond a bit lately, actually. She's been doing some volunteer work at the Historical Society. Didn't she mention it to you? My pen stopped moving. She's been down here, I said carefully. I didn't know that. Yeah, a few weeks now. She drives down Tuesday and Thursday sometimes. Stays overnight at a friend's place, I think. I keep telling her she should just stay at your house instead of paying for a room, but she says she doesn't want to bother you. He laughed a little. You know how she is. I do, I said. Yes, I know exactly how she is. The toxicology report came back on a Tuesday. I was at my desk when Howard Gregg called with the financial report, and I told him to hold, because I was reading the toxicology summary on my laptop screen, and I needed a moment. The supplement bottle, the one she'd opened in my kitchen at 1:48 a.m., had been spiked with a compound. Not poison, not something that would kill quickly. What the report described was a combination of substances that, taken daily over a period of weeks, would present as progressive cognitive decline, memory loss, confusion, disorientation. The kind of symptoms that, in a 63-year-old man living alone, might reasonably prompt concerns about his mental fitness, his legal fitness, his capacity to manage his own affairs. I sat very still for a very long time. She wasn't trying to kill me. She was trying to make me incompetent. If I appeared to be suffering from cognitive decline, documented by doctors, observed by family, perhaps witnessed in erratic behavior or confused decisions, there were legal mechanisms by which a trusted family member could petition for guardianship, could take over management of assets, could restructure an estate. I had spent 31 years on the federal bench. I had seen this exact mechanism abused twice in probate cases that had come before me. She had studied me. She had understood precisely that the most elegant way to take everything from a former federal judge was not murder. It was to dismantle the thing I'd spent my whole life building: my mind. I told Howard Gregg to stay on the line. I asked him about the estate planning inquiries Daniel had mentioned. Howard went quiet. Then, carefully, he said, Walter, there's something I was going to call you about this afternoon. Tell me, 3 weeks ago, someone contacted my office. They identified themselves as a representative of a firm called Hargrove Estate Partners, out of McLean. They said they were acting on behalf of your family in reviewing your financial planning arrangements, updating beneficiary designations, that kind of thing. They had a signed authorization document. I assumed it came from you. My grip tightened on the phone. I never signed anything from Hargrove Estate Partners, I said. Silence. Howard, send me a copy of that authorization document today. He sent it within the hour. The signature at the bottom looked like mine. It was not mine. I'd been on the federal bench long enough to know a forgery when I saw one, and to know how to prove it. Marcus Dean came to Richmond 2 days later. We sat at my kitchen table with the legal pad, the financial documents, the toxicology report, and 6 printed screenshots from my security camera app. He looked at everything carefully. He is a deliberate man. He does not speak quickly. She's been running this playbook for a while, he said finally. The cognitive decline angle, that's a long game. Months minimum. The financial inquiry started roughly 4 months ago, based on the timeline Howard gave you. She's been setting up the narrative. What narrative? That you're slipping. That you're not yourself. Meredith probably hasn't noticed anything wrong yet, but if she started hearing from Renata that you seemed confused sometimes, a little off, she'd worry. She'd start watching. And a worried daughter who sees her father getting confused, misplacing things, not recognizing certain details. That's the foundation. I looked at the screenshots, the blurred shape of Renata in my kitchen in the dark. She's done this before, I said. Gerald Whitmore, and I think possibly one more. I'm still running down a name from a case in New Mexico in 2011, a retired professor. He didn't die, but he lost guardianship of his own estate for 18 months before his son successfully challenged it. The son's lawyer at the time noted that the girlfriend, A woman matching Renata's description, going by a different name, had disappeared before the case resolved. I nodded slowly. We need to involve the police, Marcus said. Not yet, I said. If we move too soon, she walks. The forged document might be enough, but I want more. I want everything. Marcus looked at me for a long moment, with the particular expression of a man who has known enough judges to understand that when one of them says I want everything, he means it in a very specific sense. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking, I said, that she doesn't know I know, and I'd like keep it that way for a little while longer. There is a particular kind of acting that has nothing to do with theater. It's the acting you do when your life depends on appearing normal. When you sit across a dinner table from someone who has been systematically trying to destroy you, and you ask them if they'd like more wine. When you hug someone at Thanksgiving and feel the performance of it in every muscle of your arms, while keeping your face completely still. I have done that acting. I know exactly what it costs. The following 3 weeks were the longest of my life since Claire died. I had a plan. I needed to execute it precisely, without emotion, the way I would have managed a complex case, step by step, each element reinforcing the next, no shortcuts. Step 1. I continued taking my vitamins, the new sealed bottles, of course. I needed Renata to believe the campaign was working, to believe I was gradually becoming confused, distracted, uncertain. Step 2. I started making small, visible mistakes. I called Paul on a Tuesday and asked if we still had plans for Sunday. We didn't. I left a voicemail for Meredith, in which I called Cooper by the wrong name, then corrected myself with apparent embarrassment. I mentioned to Paul, in passing, that I'd gone looking for my car keys and found them in the freezer. These were the kinds of details that spread through families, organically, worriedly, in good faith, and I knew that Paul would mention them to Renata with genuine concern. Step 3. I hired an attorney. Not just any attorney. I hired Sandra Park, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Virginia, whom I'd opposed once as a prosecutor and respected enormously. I gave her everything: the toxicology report, the forged authorization, the camera footage, the background investigation from Marcus, the financial inquiry records. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting for 45 minutes. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. You want to catch her in the act, she said. I want to catch her in a way that ensures she never does this to anyone else, I said. Sandra nodded once. Then we do this carefully. We planned the confrontation for a Saturday in November. The preceding 2 weeks, I had coordinated with Sandra and Marcus, and, crucially, with 2 detectives from the Richmond Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit, whom Sandra had briefed under strict confidentiality conditions. They had enough to open an investigation. What we needed was to give them more. We needed Renata on the record, in the house. The plan was simple in structure, complex in execution. I called Paul on a Wednesday and told him I was feeling a little off, that I'd been forgetting appointments, that I was worried. I said it hesitantly, the way a proud man says something he finds humiliating to admit. Paul was immediately, genuinely distressed. Walter, why didn't you say something? I didn't want to worry anyone, I said. But I think maybe someone should come stay with me for a bit. Make sure I'm okay. Within 24 hours, Renata had called me. Her voice was warm, concerned, perfectly calibrated. Walter, she said, Paul told me you've been having a difficult time. I want you to know I'm here. Whatever you need. I don't want to be a burden, I said. Don't be silly. Your family. A pause. Actually, I have some things I need to take care of in Richmond this weekend. Would it be all right if I came and stayed with you? Just to check in? I could help get you to your doctor, make sure you're eating right. That would mean a lot, I said. It really would, Renata. Thank you. She arrived Saturday afternoon. She was exactly as I remembered her. Composed, warm, moving through my house with the ease of someone who knew it well. She made dinner. She asked me questions about how I'd been sleeping. She held my hand across the table and looked at me with something that, in another life, I might have called love. I held her hand back. I said, I'm so glad you're here. I was aware, as I said it, that Marcus Dean was parked 2 houses down the street, that the 2 detectives from Financial Crimes were sitting in an unmarked car at the end of the block, that Sandra Park was reachable by phone within 30 seconds. I was also aware, keenly, painfully aware, that upstairs, on the nightstand, on Claire's side of the bed, there was a glass of water that Renata had placed there when she dropped her bag earlier. The familiarity of it, the ease, the intimacy of someone who had been doing this for a long time. At 10 o'clock that evening, I told Renata I was tired. I said good night. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. I did not sleep. I sat in the chair in the corner of my room, and I waited in the dark for the thing I knew was coming. At 2:09 a.m., my door opened. She was wearing dark clothes. She had a small bag. She moved quietly, very quietly, to the nightstand on my side of the bed and opened the drawer. She knew exactly what was in it. My will, my advance directive, the power of attorney documents I'd filed years ago when Claire was sick, and I'd needed to be prepared for anything. She took the folder out of the drawer. She opened it. In the blue glow of the phone screen, she'd turned slightly. Not enough to illuminate her face fully, but enough. She began photographing pages. I turned on the lamp. She went completely still. I looked at her from across the room. My voice, when I spoke, was calm and level, the same voice I'd used on the bench for 31 years. Put the folder down, Renata. She turned slowly. Her face, and this is the part I will never forget, did not show fear. It showed something I can only describe as a rapid, cold recalibration, like a program running a new set of parameters. She was not panicking. She was calculating. Walter, she said, I can explain. You have been in this house at least 9 times in the past 6 weeks, I said. You accessed it through the basement window, which you oiled yourself at some point during one of your legitimate visits. You have tampered with my supplements with a compound designed to simulate cognitive decline. You have forged my signature on financial documents and submitted them to my advisor as part of an effort to gain access to my estate. You have done this before, to a man named Gerald Whitmore, whom you married, and whose estate you inherited after his death, and possibly to at least one other person before me. The room was very quiet. I am not confused, I said. I have not been taking the supplements you altered. Everything you've done in this house has been recorded. The toxicology report is in my attorney's possession. The forged document is with the police. Something crossed her face. Not fear, even then. A kind of stillness. Like a very intelligent animal understanding, for the first time, that the trap has already closed. You have no idea what your brother is like, she said quietly. You have no idea what it's been like. This wasn't about Paul, I said. Her chin lifted slightly. It was about what I deserve. After everything, after years of being the invisible one, the caretaker, the one who shows up. You all have so much, Walter, and no one ever. Please don't call the police, she said suddenly. The performance cracking, just slightly, the warmth gone and something rawer underneath. Please, I'll leave, I'll go. You'll never. It's too late for that, I said. I picked up my phone and I called Marcus Dean, and I said 2 words. Come in. The detectives entered through the front door, which Marcus unlocked with the key I'd given him. Sandra Park arrived 5 minutes later. Renata sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd held my hand over dinner 8 hours earlier, and she said nothing while Sandra read her the situation clearly and calmly. She was arrested at 2:47 a.m. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched them walk her to the car. The night was cold. The street was empty. The porch light of the house across the street was on, the way it always was, that little detail of suburban normalcy that strikes you as surreal in extreme moments. I thought about Claire. I thought about the morning I'd found the coffee mug, still warm, in the sink, and I thought about how many times, in the months before that morning, I had sat across a holiday table from Renata and felt grateful for her. Had thought to myself that I was lucky, that grief had not left me entirely alone, that there were people who cared. That is the part that doesn't go away. Not the fear, not the violation, not even the danger. It's the gratitude. The genuine, unguarded gratitude that she had used like a key. The investigation took 4 months to complete. What they found was thorough, patient, and brutal in its scope. Renata, Maria Elena Vargas, had been running variations of this scheme for nearly 20 years. The man in New Mexico was confirmed. A retired professor named Arthur Baines, 71, who had been declared partially incompetent for 14 months in 2011 before his son successfully challenged the guardianship. The woman who had appeared in his life as a caregiver had disappeared before the legal reversal. A physical description submitted by Arthur Baines's son matched Renata closely. Gerald Whitmore's case was reopened. The heart failure was re-examined. No new finding was possible after 20 years, but the investigation into Renata's financial behavior in the final months of his life uncovered a pattern of asset transfers and insurance changes that his daughter had reported, and that had at the time been insufficient for prosecution. She had been very careful. She had been very patient. She had chosen her targets with precision. Older, financially stable, widowed, or isolated, with no one watching closely enough. Men who were intelligent enough to be respected but lonely enough to be open. Men who had spent their lives earning trust from others and who therefore found it natural, easy, even, to extend it. She had found me through Paul. Had spent years becoming indispensable. Had waited until I was in the right window. Recently retired, living alone, old enough that cognitive decline would seem plausible, and had begun. She had underestimated one thing. 31 years on the federal bench teaches you, above everything else, that the most dangerous moment for any deceiver is the moment their plan appears to be working. Paul. I have to tell you about Paul. He had not known. That is the truth, and I believe it fully. And it is somehow one of the most painful parts of all of this. He had married a woman he loved. He had loved her for 18 years. He had trusted her the way good people trust. Openly, without audit, the way I had trusted her myself. When everything came out, he called me and he didn't speak for the first 30 seconds. Just silence on the line. The particular silence of a man receiving a wound so deep that his body hasn't registered the pain yet. She was in your house, he said finally. Yes, she was. He stopped. She was drugging you. She was trying to. Another long silence, then. Walter, Paul, stop, I should have. There was nothing to see, I said. I didn't see it until it was almost too late. Don't do this to yourself. But he did. He did exactly that. He did it for months. He blamed himself with the particular ferocity of a good man who believes his goodness should have been sufficient to protect the people around him. It was not his fault. Renata was exceptional at what she did. She had been practicing for 20 years. Paul filed for divorce 3 weeks after her arrest. He sold the Vermont cabin. He moved to a smaller place in Rockville. We talk every week, more than we did before, if I'm honest. There is something about surviving a thing together that makes you closer, even when neither of you can explain quite how you survived it. Renata was charged in Virginia with elder financial abuse, fraudulent impersonation for the purpose of financial gain, forgery, and criminal tampering. The New Mexico case was referred to federal prosecutors for consideration in a broader pattern of conduct filing. The Gerald Whitmore estate matter was referred to Arizona authorities. At her sentencing, 8 months later, in a Richmond courtroom, she spoke briefly. She said that she had not had the advantages others had. She said that the men she had chosen had more than they needed while she had struggled. She said that the law did not understand what it was like to be invisible. The judge, a colleague of mine, a woman named Caroline Hughes who had clerked for me 20 years ago and had become one of the finest jurists in the Fourth Circuit, listened to all of this carefully. Then she sentenced Renata to 11 years. I was in the gallery. I did not speak. I did not need to. When the verdict was read at the end of the trial, before sentencing, I had been sitting in the same gallery, in the third row, and I had watched Renata's face, waiting, perhaps, for the recalibration, for the cold computation. What I saw instead, for just a fraction of a second, was something else. Something I hadn't seen in any of the camera footage, or in the kitchen at 2:47 a.m., or at any moment in the 4 months I had performed confusion for her benefit. I saw something that looked almost exactly like relief. I've thought about that a lot. What it means, whether it's possible that some part of her, buried under the years of planning and performance and careful, patient predation, had been waiting to stop. I don't know. I'm not sure I'll ever know. And I've spent enough years in courtrooms to understand that not knowing is sometimes what the truth actually looks like. It is November now. A year and 3 months since the morning I found the coffee mug. The house is mine again. I had the basement window repaired in September, properly, with a new latch and a reinforced frame. I kept one of the cameras in the kitchen because I am a man who has learned certain things about the value of watching carefully. The others I took down. Meredith comes every other weekend with the children. She knows everything. I told her the full story in February, sitting at this same kitchen table, and watched her go through the same sequence of expressions I had gone through. Confusion, disbelief, cold horror, grief, and finally, a kind of exhausted anger that found no clean outlet and eventually settled into something quieter. She checks on me more than she used to. I notice it, and I don't tell her to stop. She needs to for now, and I am old enough to understand that the people who love us sometimes need the reassurance of presence more than we do. Cooper made me a card last month for my birthday. Crayons on construction paper. It said, in careful 7-year-old printing, "Happy birthday, Grandpa Walter. You are the smartesty, have it on my desk. What do I want you to take from this? I've thought about that too. I'm a man who spent 30 years searching for the principle underlying every case, the lesson that outlasted the verdict. I think the lesson is this: loneliness is not a weakness, it is a condition. It is as ordinary as hunger or cold. But like hunger, it can be exploited by people who understand it very precisely and have no compunction about doing so. I was not a foolish man. I was not naive. I had spent my career understanding the mechanics of human deception, and still, I was grateful for her presence. I felt warm toward her. I extended trust because grief is not a security vulnerability. It is simply a truth. The truth that we need people. That we reach toward warmth when we are cold. That the most human thing about us is also, sometimes, the most exploitable. I don't say this so that you distrust kindness. I say it so that you remember that kindness is worth protecting, worth examining, worth questioning, not with suspicion but with the kind of careful, loving attention that keeps it honest. Ask the questions that matter. Check the things that don't add up. Don't mistake the performance of warmth for the real thing. Real warmth, the kind Claire had, the kind Paul has, the kind Meredith shows me every second weekend when she walks into this house with her kids and doesn't look at me like I pre-dissolve. Real warmth does not need you to be confused. It just needs you to be present. The coffee mug is still in the cabinet. I kept it. I know that might seem strange, but it was Claire's mug, the one she'd chipped, and I'm not going to let what happened to it make me put it away. Some mornings I take it down and I hold it and I think about her. About the way she used to stand at this window in her robe, watching the backyard, not saying much of anything, just present, just here. I think about how she would have handled all of this. She was, in many ways, much more perceptive than I was. She had a way of watching people that she'd learned growing up in a family that required it. She would have seen Renata clearly within the first year, I think. Would have found the thing that didn't quite fit, the warmth that was slightly too calibrated, the attention that was slightly too precise. She would have said something like, "Walter, I don't know what it is, but something's not right there. Just keep your eyes open." And I would have listened. The hardest part of losing someone is not the silence they leave. It is the realization, in moments like these, that their presence was a kind of protection, not because they shielded you, but because they saw beside you, and two people seeing together see so much more than one. I know that now I keep my eyes open. I hold the mug. I watch the backyard in the morning the way she used to. And I am, in the ways that matter, still here and